Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. The Sports Bash originating today from Chickies and Pete's in Egg Harbor Township. Nice full bar today, getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday. Thanksgiving and football. The Eagles will resume play on Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. But before we get to that, Andrew DiCecco is here to get us the lowdown on everything Eagles. He was in L.A. with the Birds as they beat the Rams. Let's take a look back at that game and get some thoughts on him as this Eagles team improved to 9-2. Andrew DiCecco, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how are you?
All is good, bud. And L.A., obviously, an interesting opponent, kind of a middle-of-the-road team, but they have a lot of explosive type players on offense. They presume a big challenge with the wide receivers there. I want to get your take on how this young secondary impacted that game and really changed the dynamics of it with those receivers. It could be a handful.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, they did a good job, as they have all season, particularly Cooper DeJean making some good plays on the football, really aggressive, and they don't really back down, and they don't shy away from the moment. And I thought that, Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson did a good job of communicating on the back end. They don't get enough credit for doing that and helping Cooper and Quinyon get lined up properly and let them know what defense they're in. Reed Blankenship is actually, at my understanding, the elite communicator back there. So, yeah, I'm not really surprised. And that was their stiffest competition yet in terms of wide receivers, tandems. And at some point, we have to stop saying the Eagles are facing another test and just admit that they're just good. The secondary is just good.
Yeah, I think that's where people are starting to get with that secondary, is that they're good. But you mentioned it, Andrew, the communication. And I think last year we saw the communication breakdown in that secondary, leading to a ton of big plays. I think the other thing is the ability to tackle. You mentioned Cooper DeJean, but the communication on that back end is so important in this defense. And I think that is really an underrated part of why this team has been so successful defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it goes from Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and it goes to the rookies and their ability to process quickly and grasp the challenging defensive scheme of Vic Fangio. And to take it a step further, it also has a lot to do with their defensive backs coach, Christian Parker, who really prioritizes communication, explaining the why behind the calls, and really just trying to cater to players' strengths and make sure that, first and foremost, they know exactly where they're supposed to be and how it's supposed to look. So I think that all that combines to why you're seeing have so much success on the back end.
Obviously, Andrew, I want to get into the Brandon Graham thing because it ties into what you saw in L.A. How big was the Eagles' pass rush against Matthew Stafford and that Rams team, and how that impacted the game?
Yeah, Brandon Graham arguably had the best game of any Eagles defensive player in L.A. Obviously a tough loss there, but Milton Williams picks up 2 sacks. I just thought that the Eagles' pass rush really answered the challenge. Jalen Carter this week didn't show up in the stat sheet as much. You saw it in the Commanders game. He had 7 tackles, played every defensive snap. He came off later in this game, played 84%. But I just think it's a collective effort, and I'm not really surprised. They were just manhandle them, and the Eagles are playing a physical brand of football that typically translates when you get into the colder months.
Andrew, take us inside the locker room in California after that game when teammates heard the news that Brandon Graham was, in fact, going to miss the rest of the season.
It was a mixture of somber, and also they were happy that they won the game in the manner in which they did. Saquon Barkley, of course, with a franchise-altering performance there, and I just think that there was a lot of elation. But there was also other players that were clearly down and upset losing Brandon Graham. I was right there when Brandon Graham said that he's out for the season. So it's never easy to lose a player of that caliber, but more importantly, a person of that caliber. His leadership in that locker room, whether he's on the field or off the field, his mentorship, his leadership, his ability to he really knows what it takes to be a Philadelphia Eagle, and he really embodies the Philadelphia culture in many ways. So it's a much greater loss than simply on the field. It's almost as equally as impactful off the field as well.
Yeah, you talk about impactful. You wrote over at InsideTheBirds.com that guys like Jordan Mailata shed tears in the locker room. That shows you the impact that Graham has off the field. On the field, you mentioned it as well. You were watching live and in person, the best game that I thought he played all season. I concur with you there. So the question moving forward is, now what? What is in that room? How do they tackle those snaps and the production that Brandon Graham gave them this year?
Yeah, and I'll have more on this as I'm working on this throughout the week here to get a better sense. But right now they only have three guys. It's Josh Sweat, it's Jalen Hunt, it's Dolan Smith. Obviously they're going to have to add there. All I can tell you right now is who they have. And, they have Teron Jackson on the practice squad. They're signing someone named KJ Henry. He played at Clemson. So, I mean, look, Nick Sirianni, they said that he's happy with their internal options, but we'll have to see if they have to look outward for maybe a veteran presence there. I think that Bryce Huff has a chance to come back late in the season, and the Eagles probably have their fingers crossed that he can. It's probably best for all parties that he got that procedure done last week, and gives him the best shot to come back later and contribute. But the primary three is the Jalen Hunt, Dolan Smith, and Josh Sweat for the foreseeable future.
Let me get your take on Hunt coming out of the draft. Obviously, Andrew, you do a great job on the draft. A lot of people thought he was a reach in the third round, but they liked, he was a guy who played safety in the Ivy League. So obviously an athlete. Do you think that he is ready to play more snaps and help this team out, or is that asking a little bit too much?
Well, it is a big ask. I think in a perfect world, Jalix would be playing, 10 to 12 snaps, getting his feet wet, learning the speed of the NFL game, continuing to work on his pass rush approach and get stronger. I think he needs to get a little bit stronger physically. But he doesn't lack for confidence. And, again, we talk about Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Well, the moment's never too big for Jalix Hunt either. He's becoming more confident. He has a lot of veterans. And Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham's been instrumental in his development. And he's going to go out there and give everything he has. He's athletic, he's long, but it's a big ask to now all of a sudden you're third in the rotation there and you're being asked to take on a sizable workload. That's why I think it behooves the Eagles to maybe seek out a veteran on the free agent market and try to sort of bolster that group to make it so that you're not putting much on the plate of a third-round pick who's really coming along nicely, and you don't want that to be disrupted.
It's one thing to see what Saquon Barkley did on television. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. You were in L.A. Give us just a kind of a take on seeing it all materialize, how you're sitting at an angle where you can see the holes kind of open, the linemen, the pulling, and it all kind of happened in front like a symphony almost, it seems like.
Yeah, I think the offensive line deserves a lot of the credit. I know Saquon, for him to be able to maximize those opportunities, certainly should. He's going to be naturally the first one that folks talk about. But Landon Dickerson, Kai Becton, I thought was outstanding. Of course, Lane Johnson and Jordan were good as well. I mean, just collectively, Cam Durgans too, throw him in there. But I just think that they did a really good job of wearing down undersized defensive line for the Rams that really get by on quickness and athleticism. And early on in that game, the Rams had a little bit of juice, but you got, just like other teams in past this season, the Eagles continuing to lean on the running game. They have the offensive linemen to wear teams down and bully them up front in the trenches. And, eventually that 3 or 4 yard carry is going to turn into a 45, 50-yarder. And for Saquon to be able to do what he's been able to do is just tremendous. I mean, contact balance, the vision. And I just think that he has been the driving force of that offense, and he deserves to be at the forefront of the MVP conversation.
Yeah, he's up there. By the way, those numbers have dropped now to plus 425. So it was 6,000 on Friday, 600 yesterday. It's down to 425 today. So if you wanted to bet Saquon, you might be a little late on getting the best value there. But any reason, you take a look at this offense. In their wins, Andrew, 39 rushing attempts per win in the 9 wins. Some people would ask about the passing game. Do you have concerns that if they're down in a game, that their passing game is not where it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the Eagles objectively, everything more or less looks like they're firing on all cylinders and they're virtually flawless. But the passing game has been turbulent this season, and if we're being real, and my job is to analyze everything and see it for what it is that the passing game has been a bit spotty at times when they turn to it, especially early in games, which is why they're taking a run-first approach. and it helps that Saquon Barkley is playing, at at a superhuman level. But you have to wonder if they're pressed if they're really, back in the corner and they have to throw the football. Yeah, they have the talent to do it, of course. They have A.J. Brown, they have Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon can be a factor in the passing game. But, it just hasn't been, for whatever reason, they haven't been clicking all the time. And it's been reliant on A.J. breaking tackles, over the middle pass. Well, Goddard, he's been in and out of the lineup. And Devontae, we'll have to see what he's able to do when he comes back. But I just don't think that they've been on the same page for whatever reason. And sometimes it takes a while for Jalen to settle into a game, and then he makes the throws they need to make in the third and fourth quarter, but against better teams, you have to be at your best for 60 minutes.
Well, yeah, and, you could get a better perspective on this, seeing it all kind of unfold, how much those safeties have to keep starting to creep and creep and creep because of Barkley, and then when they creep and creep and creep, they get you over the top, and that's when they kind of get those big plays. They don't throw often, but when they do, it's like you got to pick your spots, but when you pick them, you got to convert in those instances.
You gotta, yeah. That's he missed Goddard on I don't know what your vantage point was on TV, but he had Goddard in the end zone for a touchdown. Like those are plays like in a closely contested game you have to convert on. Yeah. And if you're only attempting 15 passes a game, you have to make them count. And eventually, if Jalen has all the talent in the world to make those plays. It's just a matter of making them early in the game and not having to take a little time to kind of warm up and settle in, because a team like the Lions will be able to get out to a fast start, and then all of a sudden you have to alter your approach, and the Eagles have to prove that they're able to do so.
All right, there's a look back at the Eagles' win over the Rams. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast was in L.A. with the Eagles and the Rams. Tomorrow we'll take a closer look at the Eagles matchup against the Ravens. We saw the Ravens last night, obviously, so we'll have a better take on them tomorrow. We'll look at those matchups with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com here on Football at 4. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Mike.